सर्वभूतेषु विष्णुमायेति शब्दिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु चेतनेत्यभिधीयते नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः नमोस्तस्यै नमस्तस्यै नमस्तस्यै नमो नमः नमोस्तस्यै नमस्तस्यै नमस्तस्यै नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु बुद्धिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु छायारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु मातृरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः
Flame pure, ethereal type, a mighty face appeared, and lips moved by immortal words.
Okay, welcome. Good morning. We're reading in the Book of the Divine Mother, Canto 4, The Vision and the Boon. And we've come to page 337. It's quite a remarkable canto in the poem. Here, King Aswapati comes face to face with the Divine Mother, asks her to come incarnate on earth in a human body, bring her power and light here in order to transform, change the earth, deliver it from its ignorance and death. And towards the end of the canto, she consents to do this. At the same time, it's not only, this kind of beautiful encounter, but also all the difficulties and struggles of human life and of the earth are recounted in Aswapati's call to the Divine Mother to descend. So it deals both with kind of the heights and the depths of our existence. And where we left off last time, we were reading about these depths of the existence, and in particular, the powers of the nether deeps that hold the evolution back from its divine destiny. And in particular, we read towards the bottom of page 336, Sri Aurobindo says, an inert soul and a somnambulist force have made a world estranged from life and thought. The dragon of the dark foundations keeps unalterable the law of chance and death. On his long way through time and circumstance, the gray-hued, riddling nether shadow sphinx, her dreadful paws upon the swallowing sands, awaits him armed with the soul-slaying word. Across his path sits the dim camp of night. And then I read a short passage from Sri Aurobindo's The Record of Yoga that speaks about this Sphinx and about the dragon and about these powers of the inconscient that resist the uprising, the evolution of mankind towards the divine. And I want to read a little bit more about that, not from the Record of Yoga, but from Richard Hart's article called The Composition of Savitri, in which he examines these powers that are recounted here in some depth. And these are recurring themes in Savitri. They come up a number of different times. The Sphinx, the dragon, the night. We see even in the first lines of the poem that across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night sits. Oh yeah. So I wanted to read a little bit more about the Sphinx and the dragon and what they represent. Oh, Lord. Just to read briefly part of the passage from the Record of Yoga that I read last time. The four powers that resisted now appear more clearly. This is Sri Aurobindo writing in his diary about seeing these powers. the dragon of the nether foundations, who preserves the old law intact till the will of the Supreme is manifested. The Sphinx of the eternal questioning, the night of the eternal negation, the rock, and then he puts in parentheses, stone Purusha, inert Shiva, in parentheses, of the eternal inertia. Okay. So now I'm going to read a little bit from Richard Hartz's composition of Savitri. He says, by the mid-1930s, the manuscripts of Savitri had begun to reflect with some fullness not only the heights of consciousness to which Sri Aurobindo... Okay. The manuscripts of Savitri had begun to reflect with some fullness not only the heights of consciousness to which Sri Aurobindo had risen, but also the depths of unconsciousness and falsehood he was compelled to come in contact with in his attempt to get to the root of the problem of earthly life. Besides describing these realms of darkness in passages that would develop into Book 2, Cantos 7 and 8 of Savitri, he gave a graphic account of his experiences in A God's Labor, a poem written in 1935 to 36. Here we meet again the dragon and the Sphinx, which had appeared together in the late 1920s in the Record of Yoga and in the speech of the Divine Mother in Savitri. So here's from the poem, A God's Labor. A voice cried, "Go where none have gone. Dig deeper, deeper yet, till thou reach the grim foundation stone and knock at the keyless gate." I saw that a falsehood was planted deep at the very root of things, where the gray Sphinx guards God's riddle sleep on the dragon's outspread wings. The meaning of this surrealistic juxtaposition of the Sphinx and the dragon may be understood if they are seen to be two aspects of the same inconscient. I have already quoted Sri Aurobindo's statement in The Life Divine that the black dragon of the inconscience sustains with its vast wings and its back of darkness the whole structure of the material universe. But in The Life Divine, he also speaks of the riddle of the true nature of his being proposed to man by the dark Sphinx of the inconscience below and from within, and above by the luminous veiled Sphinx of the infinite consciousness and eternal wisdom, confronting him as an inscrutable divine Maya. Just as the dragon of the dark foundations guards the law that has emerged from the inconscient and substitutes its mechanical rigidity for the free and conscious working out of the divine will, so the dark Sphinx evidently represents the power of the inconscient to withhold and obscure the knowledge of the truth of our being and all being. thus turning life in this world into an impenetrable enigma. On the other hand, there is another Sphinx of the superconscient who dazzles the eye of the mind with too much light and thus poses an equally insoluble riddle. This is presumably the golden Sphinx mentioned by Savitri, or mentioned by Sri Aurobindo in Book 2, Canto 15 of Savitri. One is reminded also of the Sphinx of eternity in the Mother's Prayer of November 10th, 1914, where she said, "O consciousness, immobile and serene, thou watchest at the confines of the world like the Sphinx of eternity, and yet to some thou yieldest thy secret." Okay, now he returns to Sri Aurobindo's Nether Sphinx. Sri Aurobindo's image of this monster represented in several ancient traditions with a lion's body and a human face, with some variations and other details, seems to combine elements of the Egyptian and Greek sphinxes. The swallowing sands suggest the deserts of Egypt. The later Greek sphinx was perched on a high rock, from which she leaped to her death when her riddle was solved. But the female form and the riddle itself belong to the Greek conception. The riddle of the Sphinx, according to Greek mythology, was the question, what walks on 4 feet in the morning, on 2 at noon, and on 3 in the evening? The Sphinx killed all who failed to give the answer, which is man. For man crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks upright in the prime of life, and leans on a staff in old age. Obviously, this simple riddle, which requires only a little ingenuity to solve, cannot be exactly what Sri Aurobindo meant by the soul-slaying word of the Nether Shadow Sphinx. Yet the riddle, in its traditional form, describing man in such a way that he cannot easily recognize himself, points to the essence of the eternal and fatal question. It is the riddle of who we are. We are a riddle to ourselves, because what we seem to be is neither what we really are, nor what we are meant to become. Sri Aurobindo accepted from the Greek legend the notion of the deadly consequences of our failure to solve the riddle of our own identity. The confrontation between man and the Sphinx is no academic exercise, but a matter of life and death. Until now, the Sphinx has been the victor. Man's age-long pursuit of knowledge has not revealed to him decisively who he is. Unable to solve the riddle, he has gone on dying. But if he could know and live intricately the truth of his immortal self, the tables would be turned, and it would be the Sphinx, or death, who would die. This is what is depicted in Savitri, as foreseen in Book 11, the death of ignorance will mean also the end of death. Savitri may be regarded as Sri Aurobindo's answer to the Sphinx. There is some evidence that when he revised Savitri's debate with death, in 1946 and 47, he had come to see the riddling shadow sphinx as an aspect of death, as portrayed in the poem. The lines on the riddle of death near the beginning of Book 10, before the reference to the dragon quoted in the last installment of his article, belong to this stage of revision. And then he quotes, "Although death walks beside us on life's road, a dim bystander at the body's start, and a last judgment on man's futile works, other is the riddle of its ambiguous face." Here, to be sure, there is no verbal formulation of the riddle, but it is a riddle nonetheless. Savitri comes upon earth to wrestle with the shadow and to confront the riddle of man's birth, which is inseparable from the riddle of his death. While the Sphinx awaits man armed with the soul-slaying word, Savitri brings the saving word for which Aswapati has prayed. Let a great word be spoken from the heights. This word, expressing a supra-rational knowledge, can alone solve the infra-rational enigma, masquerading in a rational form that is posed by the Sphinx of the inconscient. When death assails Savitri's idealism with the one-sided logic of his cynical materialism, she responds, "O death, thou speakest truth, but truth that slays. I answer to thee with the truth that saves." Another passage identifies the argumentation of death even more clearly with the soul-slaying word of the Sphinx. But Savitri answered to the sophist god, "Once more wilt thou call light to blind truth's eyes, make knowledge a catch of the snare of ignorance, and the word a dart to slay my living soul?" Like the dragon, the Sphinx is a symbol whose importance in Savitri should be judged not merely by the number of occurrences of the word, but by what it represents in Sri Aurobindo's vision and experience. As one of the four powers that resisted, which he noted in the Record of Yoga early in 1927, and introduced into Savitri at some point during the same period, the Sphinx of the eternal questioning remained a force to be reckoned with in Sri Aurobindo's work of lightening. As he said in 1947, the heavy resistance of the inconscient and the support it gives to human ignorance, which is always the main obstacle in any attempt to change the world or even to change oneself. And then there's just one other passage he quotes from Savitri. "He too must grapple with the riddling Sphinx and plunge into her long obscurity. He has broken into the inconscience depths that veil themselves even from their own regard. He has seen God's slumber shape these magic worlds. He has watched the dumb God fashioning matter's frame. dreaming the dreams of its unknowing sleep, and watch the unconscious force that built the stars. He has learned the inconscience workings and its law, its incoherent thoughts and rigid acts. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his sun. There's a little more on the darkness. As we attempt to pierce the triple-plated gloom of the darkness that seems to intensify as the dawn of a divine consciousness on earth draws nearer, we glimpse the obscure workings of the mind hidden behind the dim physiognomy of night as portrayed in the opening passage of Savitri. This mind, with its negativity, its conservatism, and its refusal to admit the light, is presented as the primary obstacle in the way of the luminous event symbolized by the dawn. Huge though it is, we have found that an important aspect of the action of the mind of night can be traced to the level of the cells. At this level, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother encountered a formidable resistance to the higher forces. Their observations about the nature of this resistance point, however, to the possibility of a radical conquest. The Mother, for example, noted, there is a consciousness in the cells. It is what we call the body consciousness, and it is wholly bound up with the body. This consciousness has much difficulty in changing because it is under the influence of the collective suggestion, which is absolutely opposed to the transformation. And he says, evidently, the problem has two distinct elements. There is the nature of the body consciousness itself, and there is the influence of the collective suggestion. The crux of the difficulty seems to lie in the latter. But in that case, the cellular consciousness would only have to be freed from the tyranny of an alien influence that has been imposed on it. This may be difficult, but should not be impossible. Eventual success can even be predicted as the inevitable outcome of the struggle if it is viewed in an evolutionary perspective. The Mother went on to say, so one has to struggle with this collective suggestion, not only with the collective suggestion of the present, but with the collective suggestion which belongs to the earth consciousness as a whole, the terrestrial human consciousness, which goes back to the earliest formation of man. That has to be overcome before the cells can be spontaneously aware of the truth, of the eternity of matter. So Hart says, essentially it is an immemorial habit that has to be changed. Another quote, inflicting still its habit on the cells, the phantom of a dark and evil start, ghost-like pursues all that we dream and do. In Sri Aurobindo's epic, the being who confronts Savitri as death is represented as the source and exponent of the defeatist suggestions that keep us in bondage. We have been hypnotized, as it were, by death into believing our mortality cannot be transformed. And yet there is nothing in the actual nature of things to prevent the transformation. The spell of the hypnotic suggestion has only to be broken. The breaking of this spell is, in effect, what Savitri accomplishes as a representative of humanity in her debate with death. Okay, I think that's enough. So it's interesting that Richard Hartz precedes all of this by saying that after Sri Aurobindo's realization in November 1926 of the overmind consciousness into his body, he begins to see more clearly both the supermind above. Even up until that point, he was kind of confusing overmind and supermind. He thought he was experiencing supermind, and he realizes around this point that it was actually overmind and that supermind is still above. So he also realizes at this point more clearly, as I quoted, these dark foundations of existence, this inconscient and the workings of the inconscient and how it retards our progress and the transformation. So I think we'll continue from there. Okay, we'll start. Would you like to read? So we're on page 337, 7 lines down from the top.
Okay. A strange antinomy is his nature's rule. A riddle of opposites is made his field. Freedom, he asks, but needs to live in bonds. He has need of darkness to perceive some light, and need of grief to feel a little bliss. He has need of death to find a greater life. All sides he sees and turns to every call. He has no certain light by which to walk. His life is a blind man's buff, a hide and seek. He seeks himself, and from himself he runs. Meeting himself, he thinks it other than he. Always he builds, but finds no constant ground. Always he journeys, but nowhere arrives. He would guide the world, himself he cannot guide. He would save his soul, his life he cannot save. The light his soul has brought his mind has lost. All he has learned is soon again in doubt. A sun to him seems the shadow of his thoughts. Then all is shadow again, and nothing true. Unknowing what he does or whither he tends, he fabricates signs of the real in ignorance. He has hitched his moral error to truth, true star. Wisdom attracts him with her luminous masks, but never he has seen the face behind. A giant ignorance surrounds his lore.
Thank you. Let's pause there. I think here is elaborated quite nicely the consequences of this Sphinx, of the riddle that's presented to mankind. And perhaps an important aspect of that is this riddle of opposites with which we're confronted. Freedom, he asks, but needs to live in bonds. Need of darkness to perceive some light, a need of grief to feel a little bliss, a need of death to find a greater life. The oneness of existence is divided into these dualities, and at every step we're confronted with both ends and how to reconcile them seems to be beyond our grasp. And then the mind, all sides he sees and turns to every call. The existence is divided into a million different aspects. We see all different possibilities, different sides of the truth. We run after one or another, but cannot integrate that experience. And he has no certain light by which to walk. We can't see which of these million different aspects is true and which is not. Which one to follow, which not. His life is a blind man's buff, a hide and seek. He seeks himself, and from himself he runs. Meeting himself, he thinks it other than he. That goes back to the original question of the Sphinx. Who is man? What is man? Who is your real self? We don't know. Mm. But perhaps also in our true self, we're one with others. So we confront others and think them other, but actually they're part of our own being. Mm. Yeah. Right. Mm. Yeah, there's so much in this line, different aspects of it. But to the divine, as you say, we meet the divine and we think it other than ourselves. Margaret? Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're so influenced by the thoughts and of others, we don't know our own. Mm. Mm.
Around and can like to communicate with others. That's
So we stumble through life trying to find our way. And even the light his soul had brought, his mind has lost. So our soul comes with some guiding light, but then we confuse it and get lost in our thoughts, which can't find a correct direction. And then the mind, the characteristics of the mind, all he has learned is soon again in doubt. Even our scientific discoveries end up contradicted after some years. A sun to him seems the shadow of his thoughts. That's how the scientists conceive of man's faith in the divine, that it's just the shadow of our thoughts. Then all is shadow again and nothing true. Everything seems to be illusory, a product of an ignorant mind. What's real? We don't know. We can't grasp it. Our minds cannot conceive of a truth. It's all a subjective perception. We fabricate signs of the real in ignorance. the best we can do is make up kind of symbols of what might be real. Make up stories about sphinxes. And he has hitched his mortal heir to Truth Star. Wisdom attracts him with her luminous masks. Seems the kind of talking about faith here. We cannot conceive of truth, but we sense that it's there. We hitch our thought to it, and we're attracted by it. But never has he seen the face behind. A giant ignorance surrounds his lore. So, Tinaka, would you like to continue?
His passport of entry falls, and his personage. He is compelled to be what he is not. He obeys the inconscience he had come to rule, and sings in matter to fulfill his soul. Awakened from her lower driven forms, the Earth Mother gave her forces to his hands, and painfully he guards the heavy trust. His mind is a lost torchbearer on her roads. Illumining breath to think and pleasant to feel, he labors with his slow and septic brain, helped by the reasons facilitating fires. To make his thought and will a magic door, for knowledge to enter the darkness of the world, and love to rule a realm of strife and hate.
Thank you. He seems to be referring to the soul coming into earth life, incarnating here in the world. The soul has been assigned to meet the cosmic mystery in the dumb figure of a material world. His passport of entry false, and his personage. He comes, the soul comes, but he comes disguised, more or less, unknown to the outer form of the living being. The soul is compelled to be what he is not. He identifies with the outward mind and life and body, although he is not those things, the soul. Yeah. He's compelled to identify with the outer life at this stage in the evolution. He obeys the inconscience he had come to rule and sinks in matter to fulfill his soul. Which is interesting also, that the soul finds its fulfillment in the material world eventually. And then, awakened from her lower driven forms, as the soul evolves from plant to animal, these are her lower driven forms. The Earth Mother gave her forces to his hands, into mankind's hands and his mental knowledge. And painfully he guards the heavy trust. His mind is a lost torchbearer on her roads. He's wandering on the dark roads of life in the world with a torch, trying to find his way. And then his outer nature, what he's given to work with, illumining breath to think and plasm to feel. He labors with his slow and skeptic brain, his unbelieving brain, helped by the reason's vacillating fires. Vacillating, they're flickering, like the flickering of the torch in the dark night. To make his thought and will a magic door for knowledge to enter the darkness of the world and love to rule a realm of strife and hate. Perhaps that's the real function of mind, to make a magic door for knowledge to enter. The mind cannot really construct the truth with its thoughts, but it can create an opening for the truth to enter, can create a space for it to come, a receptivity in the being. B, would you continue?
Impotent to reconcile heaven and earth, and tied to matter with 1,000 bonds, he lifts himself to be a conscious God. Even when a glory of wisdom crowns his brow, When mind and spirit shed a grandiose ray to exalt this product of sperm and gene, this alchemist's miracle from plasm and gas, and he who shared the animals run and crawl lifts his thought stature to the immortal heights, his life still keeps the human middle way. His body he resigns to death and pain, abandoning matter his too heavy charge. A thaumaturge skeptic of miracles, a spirit left sterile of its occult power by an unbelieving brain and credulous heart, he leaves the world to end where it began. His work, unfinished, he claims a heavenly prize. Thus, he has missed creation's absolute. Thus has he missed creation's absolute.
Let's pause there. Thank you. So Sri Aurobindo continues describing the limitations of mind, but here kind of the higher developments of mind. He says it's impotent to reconcile heaven and earth, and it's tied to matter with 1,000 bonds. And even though that's the case, he lifts himself to be a conscious God. Still the mind strives, looks upward towards the heavens, towards the divine. And then even when a glory of wisdom crowns his brow, when mind and spirit shed a grandiose ray to exalt this product of the sperm and gene. So even when that light comes into this mind, which is a product of the sperm and gene, physical matter, this alchemist's miracle of plasm and gas. An alchemist is one who uses magic formulas or powers to transmute basic material things into, I don't know, better products, gold or so like that. The mind converts this material brain into luminous perceptions of the divine. And he who shared the animals run and crawl lifts his thought stature to the immortal's heights. His life still keeps the human middle way. Even though mind may be exalted and looks towards the heavens and imagines and conceives of the divine, maybe even opens up to it. It's unable to transform the life as a whole. The life still keeps the human middle way. His body, he resigns to death and pain, abandoning matter, his too heavy charge. Mind cannot deal with the mysteries of matter, and so it leaves the body. Mm. Well, I forget exactly what the Buddhist conception of that was, but perhaps it's like, don't go off too far into nirvana or into this direction or that direction. Just kind of use your common sense and move through life in a rational way. Yeah. Yeah. Don't go too far into asceticism, into nirvana. Or 0. Okay. He says, a thaumaturge, skeptic of miracles. Thaumaturge is one who performs miracles. But this thaumaturge, mind, is skeptical of miracles. It can create miracles, but it's skeptical about them. One who performs miracles. So mind is like that. It performs miracles, but it's skeptical of them. I think that's what he's saying. A spirit left sterile of its occult power by an unbelieving brain and credulous heart. Credulous is someone or something that believes too much. He's gullible to being misled. He leaves the world to end where it began. His work unfinished, he claims a heavenly prize. Thus has he missed creation's absolute. So this seems to refer to this ascetic tendency in spirituality to leave the world because it can't be changed. It's unable to grasp or grapple with the difficulty of changing matter and changing life. So it leaves. And it leaves the world we're in the same situation that it has been in. One soul escapes, but the world goes on and suffers and goes through death and rebirth. Well, he claims that this is the solution. We've found the way to escape out of life. Hmm. 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 So we'll continue. Next passage.
Thus has he missed creation's absolute. Halfway he stops here his star of destiny, a vast and vain, long-tried experiment, an ill-served high conception doubtfully done. The world's life falters on not seeing its goal, a zigzag towards unknown dangerous ground, ever repeating its habitual walk, ever retreating after marches long and hardiest victories without sure result, drown endlessly and inconclusive gain in an ill-fitting and voluminous robe. A radiant purpose still conceals its face. A mighty blindness stumbles hoping on, feeding its strength on gifts of luminous chance. Because the human instrument has failed, the Godhead frustrate sleeps within its seed, a spirit entangled in the forms it made. His failure is not failure whom God leads through all the slow mysteries. March goes on. An immutable power has made this mutable world a self-fulfilling transcendence treads man's road. The driver of the soul upon its path, it knows its steps, its way is inevitable. And how shall the end be vain when God is guide?
Thank you. Let's pause. In a way, it seems Sri Aurobindo is reiterating the point that mankind still has not been able to solve the riddle of the Sphinx. Even with our long experiments of spirituality in the past, of Buddhism and Vedantic yoga, they also have not solved the riddle of man's birth in matter. Only they found a way out, but not a reconciliation of matter with spirit. So, the world's life falters on, not seeing its goal. A zigzag towards unknown, dangerous ground, ever repeating its habitual walk, ever retreating after marches long and hardiest victories, without sure result, drawn endlessly, an inconclusive game. So we still struggle and move forward in an ill-fitting and voluminous robe, kind of a baggy dress. A radiant purpose still conceals its fates. The purpose of life still is concealed to mankind. So a mighty blindness stumbles, hoping on, feeding its strength on gifts of luminous chance. Because the human instrument has failed, the Godhead, frustrate, sleeps within its seed. A spirit entangled in the forms it made. But then he gives a positive spin to all of this. His failure is not failure, whom God leads. Through all, the slow, mysterious march goes on. And immutable power has made this mutable world. A self-fulfilling transcendence treads man's world, man's road. The driver of the soul upon its path, it knows its steps. Its way is inevitable. And how shall the end be vain when God is guide? Yeah, up until now, all our attempts at spirituality have failed. They haven't been able to reconcile spirit with matter. They've been able to find spirit, enter into spirit, but matter was too difficult to change. Life kept the human middle way. Still, the life remained human. The body was left to dissolve into death. But the transcendent who has come into this world, he still moves forward on the long path through the ages, still seeking its way. And its way is sure. The result is sure. We'll continue. Nitya.
However man's mind may tire or fail his flesh, a will prevails, cancelling his conscious choice. The goal recedes, a boundless vastness calls, retreating into an immense unknown. Possibles for the future's base.
Thank you. Let's pause. Until we know the answer to the Sphinx's riddle, we must continue on this long journey through life after life. Even though we may tire, our flesh fail, a will prevails, canceling his conscious choice. The goal recedes. The bournless vastness calls, retreating into an immense unknown. We have to continue this journey into the unknown. There is no end to the world's stupendous march. There is no rest for the embodied soul. We must grapple with this riddle of reconciling spirit and matter. It must live on. The soul lives on, life after life, describing all time's huge curve. Continue through time. An influx presses from the closed beyond. Divine forces come down, pressing on us, forbidding to him rest and earthly ease. We're pushed, forced to continue on the path. Even though we like to give up, we cannot. Till he has found himself, he cannot pause. And then again, a light there is that leads, a power that aids, unmarked, unfelt, it sees in him and acts. So we're not only pushed to search with our own strength, but there's also a light and a power that help. And then, ignorant, he forms the all-conscient in his depths. Human looks up to superhuman peaks. So this much we've already done. Even though we're a product of the sperm and gene, yet we can look up to these superhuman peaks. A borrower of supernature's gold, he paves his road to immortality. It's a beautiful image. Divine light and the divine power are within us, and they also lead and guide and help, even though we may not know their presence. How are we a borrower of supernature's gold? Maybe we get some drops of the supermental light come down, make a road for ourselves to go forward. The high gods look on man and watch and choose today's impossibles for the future's base. And that reminds me of something Mother once said about the sadhaks in the ashram that she selected to be members. And she said each one represents an impossibility, kind of a difficulty of nature that had to be solved, which she would work out in each one. So it's kind of like that. They selected these impossible conundrums to solve. Today's impossibles for the future's base. The future's supermen. So I think we stop there for today.
see a Yuletide, a mighty face appeared, and lips moved by immortal words.